knowledge of Dean too, of like, he's like, I know this is uncomfortable for you, but I also know it's uncomfortable because this was really important to you and she's important to you. So I'm gonna like make you think about this, Dean. I'm not gonna like let you just like be awkward around her and ignore your feelings. I'm gonna like be like, I see your feelings.
I like that their first reactions to meeting people that they've been in love with, like the other one's been in love with, is to be like, oh, this person is really good and too good for you. Dean's first reaction when he met Jess was like, oh, you're out of my brother's league. And then Sam's like, I bet you Cass kicked your ass a couple of times.
I bet she did.
Yeah.
It's like with each other, it's no chick flick moments, but with love interest, it's like, I'm gonna make you take the chick flick moment.
And I'm gonna be best friends with whoever you're in a relationship with because I must be.
I feel like they know it's important that they like the other one's partners, and so they go their way to like make it really clear that they like the other person.
You have my blessing.
Such a fun sibling move.
Yeah.
Sam and Dean have gotten dressed up in their suits to go talk to some of Jimmy's friends, one of which is Ron Stubbins, and they're claiming to be from an insurance company, All National Mutual. Don't know if that's a real insurance company or not. Don't really care. Ron doesn't know anything, but
Why a third alias, though? I don't understand. Also, it's a small town where most people know each other. Why?
Yeah, just say, like, oh, I'm like a family friend of Cassie, and like, you know, her dad and this guy died like 2 days apart. Like, it wouldn't be that weird to ask questions.
It'd be funny if they realized that after they got their suits on, and they're just like, oh, but we're already dressed up. We might as well go through with it.
But then there's another guy with Ron who's also a black man, and Ron was white. And the other guy says that back in the 1960s, he heard of a big black truck involved in a string of disappearances of black men. And back in the day, racism was a huge issue. Still is now, because apparently we're unable to get our shit together as a society.
Yeah, we've been working on that for like several thousand years.
We're not good at it. We're really, really bad at it.
Yeah.
But Dean compares this situation to the Flying Dutchman. I didn't feel like diving into that, so I didn't.
I was going to, but I only realized they mentioned the Flying Dutchman like 15 minutes before we were going to record, so I thought, well, there's a Ghost Ship episode later. I can do it then.
Yeah, that's pretty much. I'm like, there's a Ghost Ship episode in episode 3, or in season 3, sorry.
Oh, I like this moment where they are talking to a white man, and then he doesn't know about the string of disappearances or doesn't think of it right away, and then a black man is the one who tells them the story, because I guess that would be more significant to him. Yeah,
I feel like he was probably like concerned at the time.
Yeah, I probably thought he'd be next, so I like that they did that.
It kind of reminded me of the Atlanta child murders, because all those victims were black, and like to this day, even though it's been like 40 years, like people who were like little kids back then, you still remember like how afraid everybody was. Like that's a lasting impact on a community.
Yeah.
Dean theorizes that there's a connection to Cassie personally because, you know, it's her dad and her dad's best friend and Jimmy, who she worked with. And so Sam's like, well, how about you go talk to Cassie about it? And also while you're there, deal with your unfinished business that you clearly have. Dean freaks out a little bit. And so he breaks down and tells Sam that they were a lot more involved than he'd initially led Sam to believe. And Sam does that thing where he's like, oh, okay. But in like a sarcastic way, like, because you don't believe them.
But Sammy, there were real emotions with this one.
And it's just amazing, honestly. Jared and Jensen just play brothers so well. Sam goes on to be absolutely phenomenal. He dips a little into his whisper tone, not a lot, just a little, as he stares Dean down and informs Dean that he loves Cassie.
I love that you pointed out that he used a little bit of the whisper tone, because that's so funny considering his trend, considing when he uses it.
Yes.
This is serious. I better pull out the big guns.
I gotta convince you.
He's only uses it on distressed women and occasionally Dean.
That's, fair.
Dean, rolls his eyes and tries to, run away from the conversation a little bit, but Sam, presses him and realizes that Cassie is the one that dumped Dean, and Dean yells at Sam to get in the car.
Oh.
It's not just we're not going to talk about this. It's I'm not going to say anything about that. I'm just going to yell at you.
Oh, no.
Got emotions he needs to work out.
Yeah. Sam struck a pretty clear nerve.
Yeah.
I think Dean's also realizing, he's like, oh, shit, I'm going to have to deal with this. Aren't I? Sam is not going to let me get away with leaving this town without dealing with this with Cassie. Also, Sam is way more invested in this relationship than I expected.
I think Sam's sort of invested in that because as he's grieving Jess.
Oh, for sure. Oh, that hurts.
Yeah.
That's the worst.
I think he's like, okay, like, I think up to this point, he's like, Dean can't understand because he's never had what I had with Jess. But I think he's realizing that Dean does have a little bit of that as well. Anyway, that's a thought I just had right now.
He wants Dean to have the closure that he didn't have with Jess.
Oh, man. Wish I hadn't said that.
I wish I hadn't thought it.
That hurts.
Oh, Sam.
Poor Sam.
Poor Sam.
Dean shows up at Cassie's alone. She's writing a tribute to Jimmy. He was the paper's very first black reporter. The family that used to own the paper had a whites-only staffing policy, and when they sold it, Jimmy was the first black man to get hired. Cassie's mom did not want to talk about whatever Mayor Todd alluded to when Cassie asked about it, so Cassie doesn't have any further information about that. And Cassie asks where Sam is, just like as a common courtesy, I think. Sam's probably safe given that he's white, but I wouldn't be totally sure of that. So I guess it's also kind of nice to be like, is Sam somewhere where he's not going to get run off the road? Like, just because it's only been black men up to this point doesn't mean it's going to stay that way. Dean calls Cassie out a little bit and asks if it would be easier if Sam was there to like be like a buffer. And she says that it's not easier, but before she can explain, Dean starts shutting her down and getting upset. Now Cassie turns the tables and starts calling Dean out because Dean pulls away every time they approach emotional vulnerability. Exactly what we just saw in his interaction with Sam, where he tried to run away and then just yelled at him. Dean gets a little bit mad and makes damn sure to remind Cassie that she is the one who dumped him. It's part abandonment issues and part love languages stuff, but he gets very upset by anyone even implying that he left them, be it Sam or Cassie or Cass in later seasons. He must always be the person being left behind. In his own mind, he must always be able to justify to himself that he was the one who got left. So he is very sure to remind Cassie that she broke up with him and not the other way around.
Yeah, I like that we had that discussion before doing this episode.
Cassie says to Dean that this is like, he told her this unbelievable story about killing monsters and ghosts and then left with his dad, and she thought that he made up this story so that they could break up. Dean says it's the truth, and he notices she believed him once she thought he could help her, and she said, oh, I didn't know that back then. I thought you just wanted to like break up or whatever.
It makes me think they both, in the breakup scenario, like neither of them were very good at communicating. Like I think they've both got a little bit more emotional intelligence than they clearly had when it happened originally. Yeah. Because I don't feel like they got a real conversation in there.
I agree.
From what we know, this is Dean's first like real relationship that like either he has had or that we just know of. So like he really did not know what to do in this situation. So for him to just be like, I'm gonna tell her and hopefully it goes out good, fingers crossed, guys.
Every other scenario, it's ended badly. And like when we find out stuff from like flashbacks later on, like every other time before this that he's had like something even bordering on a relationship, even as like a teenager, either he's been like dragged away by his dad or the person has left him.
Yeah, that's true. He's never really had the opportunity to break up with anyone, so he wouldn't know how to do it.
No, and he clearly didn't want to with Cassie. Like, he clearly didn't see that happening. Just like repeated the pattern that he already kind of expects, I think, in his life of like people leaving him.
Yeah, totally.
And also, he's just had this like really emotionally repressed childhood, so he wouldn't really have anything to build off of in order to break up with anyone.
And he didn't have anyone to like even go, like he just had his dad at that point. Like he didn't have Sam. He's not gonna like go and talk to John about the breakup. Like maybe if Sam had been there, Sam would have been able to be like, hey, like it sucks that she doesn't understand. Yeah, exactly. Like Sam would have at least emotionally supported him in a breakup situation, whereas John definitely wouldn't have.
No.
It's a really awkward transition between them fighting and them having sex. For our listeners, if we have any underage listeners, the listeners who are interested in hearing us talk about this sex scene, maybe skip a couple minutes because I have things to say about it.
I think it's the first one in the show.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
explicitly at least.
This is a much better shirtless Jensen moment than Skin.
Well, comparing those is.
I think it's hilarious.
It is hilarious.
I got this piece of trivia from IMDb, which is not a reliable source, but I'm really hoping that this is true. Apparently, the network told editor Anthony Pinker not to show Cassie on top during their sex scene. And Anthony basically turned around and said, "Don't tell me what to do." And thus, Cassie is shown on top of Dean. Dean was shown on the bottom. I'm not going to dictate what you should or shouldn't think or extrapolate from that information.
Our listeners can, take what they will. Exactly. Do you take future information from what you know from the internet and other canon?
Yeah, Dean being a bottom is a running joke.
Among, many fans and also people involved with the show.
Dean's amulet also stays on for this entire sex scene, which I appreciated the attention to that detail. These are two very attractive people. I have no complaints about anything that we see in this scene. I think that it was just well done.
Nice. I usually look away during sex scenes, so I'm impressed that you were able to see the whole thing.
I have a pretty major crush on Cassie.
That's fair.
And then my pre-existing love for the Winchester brothers as a collective group. No complaints. Then we're back with Mayor Todd. He's at some sort of property. As he returns to his car, he sees the truck and he doesn't even have time to get into his car. He's just plain run over. And then we're back.
Oh no.
Yeah, we see just a little hint of that. And then we're back with Cassie and Dean, who are in bed together, but they're just chatting and enjoying each other's company. Cassie says maybe she was looking for a reason to walk away from their relationship, but she thought that he was crazy and a little dangerous and same girl. If someone told me this whack story about how my mom got killed by a monster and my dad hunted monsters for a living, I also would run. That's all of the red flags that you need. Especially in your 20s. Of course you're gonna think that that's crazy.
And maybe that this guy is dangerous.
Dean says he was more scared to work things out with her than deal with any of the horrible things that he deals with as a hunter. So that's a huge step in emotional vulnerability.
Also, that checks out. That'll be true forever for him. Emotional vulnerability is much more scary than monsters.
I'd rather fight a monster than be vulnerable.
Yeah, Yeah, actually.
Dean says he's still a hunter, still involved with John in their work, but Cassie doesn't really say she cares about that. In fact, she kind of says she doesn't care. But then Sam called to tell Dean about Mayor Todd's death. He's really happy that Dean never made it back to the motel room the previous evening and asked if they worked some things out. Sam shipped it. It makes me actually happy how much Sam wants the relationships for Dean in this show. Dean wants Sam to be happy as much as anybody else, but
that's very sweet.
He doesn't always take it so well when Sam actually tries to have it, whereas Sam just seems to get joy from Dean having it.
Aw.
I'm sure we'll get to that when we get to some more serious relationships for both of them. But Dean says that they're going to be working things out when they're 90. I wish that they'd made Cassie a recurring character.
I don't know why they didn't. It almost seems like they were
planning
at least leaving the door open for it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if they had more female characters on this show, I wouldn't be complaining.
I don't think anyone would be complaining. Literally anybody.
Probably a few people, but
I know there would be some.
We don't like those people.
They didn't have to be endgame or anything. I wouldn't take that from the SDL shippers, but bring Cassie back.
But she could have been so much more significant, and she is clearly so significant in his emotional journey pre-series. It would have been so cool to see that develop now that she knows about monsters. But also, I don't see Cassie being oh yeah, I'll just leave my life and the career I've worked for.
Yeah, she was super educated. And
she's a full she's her own person, and her pairing up with him would have like Sam identified, she would have kept him on his toes and kicked his ass when he needed it, which he needs it a lot in the future of the show.
On that note, I do like that she didn't abandon her life for him, and she's remaining her own person and her own character.
Yeah, exactly.
Instead of just being tagging along and being Dean's love interest.
Yeah, totally. Mayor Todd is hella dead, but as Dean points out, I said hella dead because I think Sam said every single bone in his body was broken. For context,
that's pretty dead.
Yeah, that for me that qualified. Jean points out that Mayor Todd's white.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I couldn't tell.
Yeah, and then Dean goes to Cassie's work, and Cassie informs him that the records probably aren't going to be great because the victims of the killings in the 60s were all black men. Remember in Hookman when the really helpful and unobtrusive, not question-asking librarian found them police reports from all the way back in 1851? She had arrest records from 1851. These people don't even have the records of a bunch of disappearances that went unsolved from the 1960s.
But racism, honestly, racism is probably why.
Racism has always been pretty powerful motivator.
For destroying evidence.
I mean, the victims in Hookmen were all sex workers, so that's not an improvement by much, but they were probably white, honestly.
It got them an extra 100 years of arrest records.
There we go.
Sam has gone to find the property records, and Mayor Todd had bought the property a few weeks earlier around when the killing started. It was previously abandoned, and the Dorian family owned it for like 150 years before that, and that's the same family that Cassie mentioned owned the newspaper and didn't let